The journey is conversations with ordinary people about stories of transformation and how we may have had setbacks in our life and how we persevered through those, how we've learned from those obstacles, and how they've maybe helped us on our path today.
Well, welcome to the journey. My name is Kevin Polkey, and I am the host of the journey, and a lifelong friend of mine, a former guest on the journey, Tom Leu. Actually, it was 5 years ago, right about now, that you said that was the last time you were on the journey in the world. I mean, obviously, June of 2020 compared to where we're at now of June of 2025, things have changed. But just for the audience to, know that, you and I go back to middle school, playing football together at middle school and wearing Y95 jackets,
I
and
still
going to
have it, by the
going.
way.
Same here. It's in my basement museum. Well, at least that's what Diane says that is where the
Wow.
museum's going to be. It's all in boxes.
I
So
like the museum term. That's a nice touch.
yeah. So well, Tom, welcome
Thank
back
you.
onto the journey, and I'm glad you were able to make some time for us today. I know that we even have to go over different time zones because you're in Florida now.
Yes. Yep.
And how long? Yeah, refresh our memory. How long have you been in Florida?
I've been in Florida since 2018, Kevin. So it's over 7 years now. Hard to believe. Moved here in January of 2018, right when I turned 50. I'm not afraid to say it. And so you do the math on how old I am, but yeah, we're about the same age. And seven plus years in Florida, Eastern time. Quite a life change it's been for me. I learned so much these last 7 years. I had no idea what I was going to learn and how it was going to go, but it's been good, challenging like everything. But yeah, I'm enjoying it, and it's been 5 years already since I've been on the show here with you again. So it's glad to be back.
So when one of the questions I always ask is, what you do for fun? What do you do when you have some spare time? And I know myself and for you, that's evolved over time. And so
Yeah.
when you have an opportunity to have some downtime or have fun, what do you do?
My wife and I were big outdoors people. We go outside. We moved to Florida for the weather and the beaches and all of the things that people come here for. On vacation. We just kind of moved to it permanently, and so we're outside, Kevin. We ride bikes. We've gotten bikes here, e-bikes, regular bikes, both. There's trails all around where we live. I'm about 4 miles from the Gulf, so we go out and walk and ride bikes, and we're just outside a lot. I go to the gym a lot these days, more than I ever did in the past, and just trying to keep my body healthy, healthy body, healthy mind. All of that is it's very true. It's very important, and probably more than ever, in my life, those are the things that I spend time on. I'm an empty nester, so the kids are all gone. They're all living in other states, and they have their lives and stuff. So we just focus on being outside, being healthy, and then in the work that I do that really isn't really work to me. It's fun, but it's also I take it real seriously, as well. So yeah, we like to be outside a lot. Although in the summertime in Florida, it's a little challenging because it's so darn hot, as everybody knows.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting when we met in person a couple months ago. You were talking about that when storm season starts, it's also coincides with the increase in humidity and the increase in heat.
Yeah.
And it's for people who live in Florida, it's as challenging as it is for people in, the upper Midwest when it comes to wintertime.
Yeah, it really is, Kevin. And again, we have to get creative in the summertime. Right around now, walking, even going outside and walking, it's challenging certain parts of the day. It's just too hot. So find places, mall walking, going to a mall. Yesterday, we went to a nearby mall and we walked the mall. Yes, I turned into one of those people. I suppose nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong with those people. I'm just saying, I've become one of those guys. I get it now. It's a way to stay active. Can't stay cooped up all the time. You've probably so many adages to this, but you're feeling down, you're feeling blue, you got something going on, your mind won't shut off. Move your body. That's the message. That's what I've been taught in my life. Move your body, even if it's just a little bit. You don't have to climb a wall or jump a jump something. You just move, and it changes your brain chemistry and makes you feel a little bit better, at least temporarily, and that builds on itself. So I take that part real seriously.
Yeah. Well, and it's such an interesting thing, like as I told you, I'm 4 months out of a hip replacement surgery, and that part of it's only half the story. It was all the deterioration that was going on, and the
Mm,
adapting that I was doing prior to that. And I remember my physical therapist telling me is that, motion is going to allow that pain to be less. And it's the last thing, you know, mentally that I want to do is to move, but it's like moving through that initial discomfort so you actually get the blood flowing so that you're not in as much discomfort. And to your
mm,
point, that's the physical aspect of it. So mentally, I got to push myself to physically move so I physically feel better. But coincidentally, when I'm in fight or flight, when I'm feeling threatened or stressed or a negative mindset,
mm.
movement is also the number one go-to to burn off those chemicals of adrenaline and cortisol so that we can get into, rest and digest, right? And so
Yeah.
it goes both ways, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. It all kind of goes together.
Agreed. Yeah, 100%. And back in the day when I was a younger guy, you'd hear these things, and I was like, ah, yeah, sure. And you're young. I don't know. For me anyway, when I was young, that doesn't really apply to me back then. But today, it's so important. And walking is probably more mental for me. The benefits, just what you're talking about, burning off that cortisol and the anxiety. And listen, just because myself or yourself, we teach these sorts of things, we talk to people, and we do that stuff. It doesn't mean that I tell people all the time that I'm immune to the very things that I teach others to maybe to help improve with. I'm susceptible to it. In fact, I teach mostly from my own experience, things that I've gone through and either done well or done poorly many times. But then you make a shift, you learn some things, and movement and all that. In my recovery, long-term recovery from alcohol. We talked about that on our first visit 5 years ago. It's a key factor in what keeps me on that road. I'll be coming up on 23 years. I think it is in December. And, it's that movement and going, and for me, it's going to the gym, 3 days a week at least, and lifting weights. Not to be a bodybuilder like, you were and everything. It's just to stay healthy and to stay fit. And, getting into your late 50s, that becomes, more important than ever. I want some longevity. I want to be around, and hopefully, grandkids and all that. So yeah, movement is so important, mentally, physically, all of it. So I can't get enough of it. Keep going, even when I don't feel like it. I think that's a key thing. Even when you don't feel like it, which for me, if I'm being honest, Kevin, is often, but I do it anyway most of the time.
Well, and you're 100% right. That even though we may talk about this, we may teach it, we may counsel or coach people with this, it's still a choice. And I still got to discipline myself to do it. I still got to choose to do, and for me, I have to do it. I don't work out twice a day, but I have to intentionally make sure I'm doing exercises and moving in the morning before my day starts. And then when I get home at night, I got to do certain things. I choose to do certain things because I sit a lot during the day, and I need to be able to, and I'm absorbing a lot of people's energy and stuff. So I
Yeah.
move to get that energy, to a life-giving place. So yeah, I agree. And feeling like it usually is not always there. It's
Yeah.
just doing it, so absolutely. So, reflecting back on 2020, right?
Mm,
We got this, none of us knew what was going on. I mean, some of us acted like we did. Some of us, said, they had an opinion about this or opinion about that. But, really it was like there was a lot of unknowns
mm,
and a lot of fear that was happening, right? And
yeah.
and not only was it the virus and the pandemic aspect of it, but it was the everything shutting down, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I you know, it was stuff you only read about, right? And then all of a sudden we're experiencing it, and it was like literally overnight, and so when you think about that time period, and not only then, but over the last 5 years, what comes to mind?
Yeah, June of 2020 is when we talked last, I think we said, and how different the world was at that time and the unknowns that we were all experiencing. There was this, once a generation pandemic and everything was shut down. What does this mean? How do we operate? We were all stuck inside and all the things that we all went through. And, a year of that, a couple of years of that, and things started to change. 2021, 2022, things started to open back up depending on where you lived. And we all sort of got back into our regular lives. We reintegrated back and we carried on where we left off. But, in my world, Kevin, I talk a lot about, how we communicate in our psychology. And I talk about those things as two separate things, but I integrate them because often I found that they're talked about separately. And never has this been more important than since COVID. And we all went back to our lives and it's not really discussed as much, I don't feel, as it needs to be. But we don't really talk about how different the world is today than it was then because of that and all of the changes from public health and just us as individuals and how we interact. We don't talk about this massive shift that happened. And we're more connected than ever before with technology today and all of that. We all understand that, and it's only going to increase with artificial intelligence and all of that. But yet we seemingly are more disconnected than ever as well. We can hop on a Zoom here and be connected, but I'm just talking about the connection at the gut level, the intrapersonal and interpersonal connection. And we're more different and we go about our business and we're more divided and we all know this, we all understand this. The world is very different 5 years later than it is now. And I just think it's so important that we talk about this and own it because none of us are exempt from the fallout from it. This disconnection, I think a lot of people, are experiencing, but not really talking about. It's an anxiety producer. Obviously, it contributes to depression levels and all kinds of things. And we're talking about moving and all that, and that helps. But what I talk about in my work is kind of digging into that and looking at that and working on ways to be conscientious about it, but also very deliberate about going into those things and looking at how different the world is now and what does that mean for me as an individual, both the communication with myself, my intrapersonal communication, how I talk to myself, and then how I will talk to you or anyone else that I work with on a professional or a personal level. So it can't be understated how different the world is today, and it's just continuing to be that way. And so it's never more important now for us as individuals to understand and lean into how are we as communicators and be honest about it. What do we do well? What do we not do well? Where are some of our sticky spots where we need to improve? And not only but our communication, but our thinking, because our thinking and our psychology precedes most of the time our communication and how we communicate. I talk about our psychology is who we are, our communication is how we are and how we express that. You more introverted, you more extroverted. Are you more of a leader? Are you more of a support personality? What's your gift? What's your thing? And kind of zeroing in on that stuff and embracing those things. And so the change from 5 years ago till today is astounding, and it's still going on. And I think we need to talk about it more.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, and I know what I'm about to ask you about or say, I know that it was, going on before and it has always been part, but it seems like, a couple things. One, the amount of this underlying fear that it seems like people are experiencing, I think, how
Mm.
almost like there was a carefreeness in 2019, and then all of a sudden there's this energy, this fear, right? It's like pre 9/11, post 9/11, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What is truth? Who's telling me the truth? What is really going on? That's a whole nother issue, right?
Right.
And then but ultimately this whole idea of that I'm afraid that, like, when that was the first time in my life. Again, 9/11 may have been close. The space shuttle, blowing up when we were in school, when that happened and the astronauts died, there's some things that happened, but when that pandemic happened, there was this feeling of, is the sky really falling? What is,
Mm.
so yeah, what is your thoughts about communicating about what we're afraid of, and discerning how do we, the self-talk you were talking about?
Yeah, you said the word there, the four-letter F word, Kevin, fear. So much fear. I think we all experienced unprecedented amounts of fear and confusion from COVID, depending on who you were and where you were with it all, and not politicizing it in any way, but it affected everyone. And I feel we've lost a lot of empathy. Though everyone was so fearful and we've moved forward from it, and we don't talk about it, and the world is so different now. But as communicators, when you bring it back to that, the old adage, it sounds so simplistic, but it's a huge thing. You treat others as you wish to be treated, and I just see less of that than ever before in many places. I'm not saying it isn't still there in many areas, but in many areas it's not. We retreated to silos, literally, and then we doubled down on what we believe, and fear will push people to do things and think things that they may not have even realized that they would have themselves. Changes you, and then you come out of it, and I feel like empathy is lower. I feel like our effort and our willingness, if you will, to understand, take the time and the energy to understand others, where they're coming from, even if we don't agree or we think we don't agree, because often I think disagreements are they're up front. It appears there's disagreement, but if you spend a little time and dig down, we're maybe not as different or as far apart as we think we are, but people don't spend that time. We don't have the time. Everything is so fast paced. The world moves so quickly. We don't have time to dig down, and that's kind of a mistake. And that's part of what I talk about, when I work with, whether it's educators, I work with corporate leaders, entrepreneurs, all the way to executives. It's slowing down and taking a look at our own individual skills as communicators. I poll people every time I do a talk. How many of you think you're a pretty good communicator? And without fail, most people will raise their hand. Yeah, I'm pretty good. People don't say they're perfect, but they'll say I'm pretty good most of the time. And if you press it, it's others that have the issue. Everyone says that. Well, if everyone else has got the communication breakdowns except for us and ours, you can see where this leads, and it's not true. It's kind of a circular reasoning. It's self-fulfilling prophecy. We need to get honest about these things. We need to get honest about how we feel since COVID. There's a lot of lingering anxiety, a lot of lingering depression, and it might not be discussed. It might not even be labeled, but it's there, and it's driving what people do, don't do, believe, don't believe, think, and feel. And the world is suffering for it. And so I think it's time that we look at that and be honest about that, and lean into those things and say, how can I be better so that I can be better for you? Be better for me, also be better for you, because I've established you as a person that's important in my life, and we have to work together. If we do, coworkers, friends, family, whoever it is, we have an obligation. The onus is on us, though, to begin the change. It's not always you that has to start to change first. It's me. And that can be difficult when we factor in ego, and self-esteem and all of these things. Now we get into the psychology part of it. So we need to talk about these things, and we need to be honest about the things that we still are struggling with if we hope to get better.
Yeah. Well, and I 100% agree. And I think to have the courage, right, to be open, first look at what, I just recently did a talk with a team that I'm working with, a leadership team that I'm working with, on a consulting job, and we were talking about the importance of emotional intelligence
Mm,
to develop empathy within the workplace, right? That
mhm,
empathy is this essential key. And to your point, it for the work with Goldman, originally Daniel Goldman, with emotional intelligence, it started always with self-awareness, internal, external, being self-aware within me, what's going on within me being accountable to take ownership of that, so that I can be open to be in relationship, or at least present with the person I'm interacting with, so I can, because we got into the discussion on that training about discerning about empathy versus how does that transition, how does that uh, sometimes cross over to enabling?
Mm,
I'm so empathetic about what's going on that now I'm enabling and causing you to be dependent
yeah.
instead of helping you, assisting, coaching you, through something. How do we discern?
Oh, that's such a great point. Yeah, empathy and that line to enabling. I was privileged back in the '90s. I worked at a company, and a gentleman and his wife Maury and Arlia Scheckman. I went through this intense training back then. It changed my life. I was in my late 20s. I didn't realize how fortunate I was then to go through this. But very simply, among other things that they taught back then, they talk about the difference between caretaking and caring for. Caretaking is a synonym for enabling. It's where you allow mediocrity, you allow things to get swept under the rug, you allow people to be less than their best by not challenging, not confronting in the right way at the right time, and allowing them to just sort of wallow in mediocrity or worse. Whereas caring for someone is telling them the truth, but again, with a caring spirit at the right place at the right time, and in a way that's going to empower them, not discourage them. And that's painful when someone's caring for you and they're giving you feedback and you might not always want to hear it. It's painful. We all understand that. We don't like it, but that's how we grow. We grow in the dark, right? We grow through challenges and stuff. And so, the three legs of the communication stool that I teach about, similar to what you talked about with Daniel Goleman, but starts with self-awareness. We have to understand how we're coming off to others. It's not everyone else. It starts with us. How am I coming off? And the challenge with self-awareness is a lot of what we do and how we are is subconscious. We don't even realize we're doing it. Facial tics, nonverbal things, all this stuff that we're not aware of that we need to spend time on. Second is situational awareness. How aware are you of your surroundings at any time? At a grocery store yesterday, and of course the cart's in the lane and it's blocking the whole thing, and the lady's taking her time and she's completely oblivious to any other person around her. And you can see the chagrin of others around. You might think that's such a minor thing, but how many other times does that happen in meetings, in business meetings, on email threads or social media, etc.? And then third is self-management. You can be self-aware, you're situationally aware, but then you have to learn self-management. What's best next? What should I do next? I've got feelings about this. This over here bothered me. I'm angry about this. I'm sad about that. Once we get emotional and emotional intelligence, all bets are off in terms of how we communicate sometimes, because that part of our brain is taking over. So we have to be aware socially and self, and then we also have to manage ourselves and not allow, like you're saying, things to turn in from empathy to enabling. And those are difficult things to lean into, but that's kind of what is needed to improve in these areas. And once you raise your awareness about such things and are really honest about leaning into it, and let's face it, we're not all honest about it because it requires feedback, and that includes me. That it's everyone. We drop the ball on that stuff. But I truly believe it's the difference between those who have and those who have not, in terms of what you can get in the world, or how you can proceed, how you can succeed, things like that. Everything from business to personal relationships, And so it's really important to look at these things. But caretaking, caring for, it's a subtle distinction, but so important.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, 100%. I mean, I have a couple different companies I do some consulting for, are some very um, the clients that they work with, the patients that they work with are very difficult situations, from domestic violence to human trafficking to addiction, opioid addiction, to the suicide prevention program that I was telling you about. And we talk about this idea that as counselors, as coaches, as mentors, as leaders, that we need to be living within this tension, kind of like what you were just talking about, of being able to be self-aware enough that, yes, I need to be able to nourish mentally, physically, emotionally, this person by caring for them. But then at the same time, am I teaching them the skills so that they can fish on their own?
Yeah.
Or am I always giving them the fish, and then there's a dependency on that? Or living within that, when do I move from, giving them enough nourishment so that they can then learn the skills of life skills so they can fish for the remainder of their life.
Yeah, and how do you give them those skills? And take 10 people, it's not a one size fits all. 10 people are going to need 10 different approaches to best, if it's given to them in the way that they're best wired and prepared to receive it. And that's a big difference. That's the thing that's interesting about all of this. It's how we're best wired to receive the information. You know, communication has always been talked about and pigeonholed, Kevin, as a soft skill. We've all heard this. It's a soft skill, you know, a secondary attribute, if you will, overshadowed by one's technical expertise. You know, our formalized training, the letters after our name, our degrees, our certifications, all of which are important, all of which have value. Of course, never downing that. But I've worked with and talked with and interacted with some of the smartest people in the world, PhDs in various areas, that really struggle to communicate their otherwise great ideas and great expertise in a way that can be received by others in a palpable way that they can actually take some value from it. And more so than just learning the what, now they've got some how to. And so what I teach a lot is what I call it communications transaction analysis, CDA. Everything, you go to a bank and you bring some money in, you make a withdrawal or a deposit, it's a transaction, right? There's a process, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end of how it goes. You go to a store, you pick out some stuff you want to buy, you go to the counter, you check it out yourself these days, and then you pay, right? It's a transaction. Well, communication is a transaction as well. We're transacting right now, you and I. We're talking on here. We're doing it via this particular online platform in this case, which brings with it its own set of challenges, benefits and challenges than if we were in person. But it's analyzing the transaction between individuals and really drilling down what worked there, what didn't work. From everything from little office hiccups, disagreements, to, you know, offices with a bunch of therapists that are highly trained and educated to work with others, but how do they themselves, also fallible human beings, how are they working on themselves in that way and getting that feedback that they need to be the best for their clients? And that's just one example. I teach a lot of teachers, Kevin. I work with a lot of instructors. I used to be an academic dean and an educator, a psychology teacher myself, and communications teacher for many years. And I work with a lot of educators now on teaching educators how to be better communicators, because that sounds so simplistic, but how many of us have had, think back, any of us listening, anybody listening, you had teachers in your life, you had many. You can remember one or two that were outstanding for you. You can think of them right now. You see them in your mind's eye. When I think of the best teacher you ever had, we can all think of a couple or a coach or someone who really made a positive influence on us. And then we can also, on the other side of the coin, envision those that maybe weren't as impactful or less than, not so good. Why is that? Both educators, but they did it differently, and the impact was different. In some cases, lifelong impact is different. And so digging into that process of how we are based on who we are, but then understanding that also applies to our audience, be it of one person or 1,000 people. And the environment that we're in, it's not a one size fits all. One-on-one on a Zoom is completely different from a workshop with 30 people in a classroom type of a thing versus on a stage at Rockford University with 1,000 people or something. You know, all different things. One-on-one with your significant other or your kid versus your old friend from high school. Different situations that require different kinds of skills. And it's more important than ever, especially in our post-COVID world, I argue, that we need to look at this stuff that way and not just kind of relegate communication skills as a soft skill, nice to have, but not really important or not as important, when all the stats say that's what all employers everywhere are looking for. People that have a more of a mastery of the thing that you mentioned, emotional intelligence and these soft skills, so they can be the best for the organizations that they represent and be the most productive for themselves and their businesses. And that's what everybody wants, but we got to do the work first to get there.
Well, and I think, it's interesting when you talked about that. I had, a high school teacher popped in my mind, that was an English teacher. And I just remember, I just remember not feeling like I learned anything at all. That it was, that it was very much, just almost like read off a script almost. And then I remember, an instructor, professor at a couple of them at Rock Valley and then Illinois State and U of I that were, for me, were a match for me because they were phenomenal storytellers. I could picture in my mind when they were telling a story about whatever it might have been, I could see it. Where if someone was just reading off, here goes how old we are, an overhead, right? Or something,
Yeah.
like, and I know for me that seemed to be a huge difference. And today is very similar, that how much more will I walk away with when someone is able to deliver it in a story and illustrate a point with a story, but they communicate that way versus just, reading me the content of what they've studied or what they've discovered or whatever it is. And because to your point, how does one, our challenge, regardless if it's a one-on-one or if it's a larger presentation, how do we deliver it in a way that they actually take something with them after the workshop and apply it to their life, right? I mean,
Yep. That's the biggest challenge for anyone that does what you and I do, or to any extent, or whatever. Is the what is important. When I grew up, we got a lot of presentations on the what. Here's all this great information. Well, that was pre-internet. Everybody has access to all the same information today. There's no shortage of information that we can gather by just clicking a few things on our computers. We get all the information that we need. But how do we communicate that information so that it can foster or light a change, spark a change in someone, that they actually do something different? That's the thing. It's the doing. It's the doing. We can think about it all day. We can ruminate on it. We can meditate on it. We can pray about it, whatever people do. But it comes down to the actual action, a change in behavior that elicits a different result, a change in behavior that brings upon a different outcome. And the outcome is hopefully, thought about in advance. I want to do a successful conversation with my friend Kevin today on his podcast. I want to try to offer some value. I'm thinking about this in advance. How do I best do this? Well, I'm hopefully doing it now. I'm trying to explain, where I'm coming from, that maybe if someone listens to it, they not only come away with, well, that was good information, but here's something that I can do. And you talked about, telling stories and meeting people where they are. But as easy as it sounds to do that, Kevin, how do we do that? How do I meet you where you are? Well, I have to know more about you and where you are now. And even if I've known you for years, like I've known you for years, where you are today versus where you were 5 years ago, maybe it could be radically different or not, or even 1 year ago, or even 6 months ago. What's happened in people's lives, especially as we age, we're getting older. We talked about our parents and, dealing with aging parents and different things, and our own changes, our own physical changes and challenges and all of these things. And so telling stories is a way to do that. But first, we have to ask a lot of questions. And I'm doing a lot of talking here today because that's the purpose of one of these. But it's about asking questions of people, finding out who they are, where they are, how they are, as I was talking about. And then the onus then shifting to me to adjust how I communicate with that person going forward. It's not manipulative. It's not disingenuous. It's actually more genuine and demonstrating more empathy because I'm taking an interest in someone. And then I can communicate with them in a level, tell a story from my life that I think will matter to them because I've learned something about them instead of just some story of mine that they may or may not resonate with. Talk to them about something that perhaps they can also tie into. That's work that you do in advance. That's the heavy lifting of communication, and it requires us to be good communicators, verbally, written, things like that, but also to understand, our own psychology a little bit. I'm not saying you got to be a social worker or a counselor. Certainly helps if you have those skills as well. But all of us, though, are a part of this. All of us are responsible for this. How well do you know your friend or your neighbor that you talk to all the time? Have you spent any extra time? Maybe that division that you feel or that friction that you feel isn't as deep or as wide as you think if you approached it a little bit differently. So analyzing the transaction of the communication to do some different things to get better outcomes. That's what I teach.
Well, it's an interesting with what you just shared, kind of just recapping a little bit is that, we think many times when we think about communicating, what comes to my mind is about what I'm saying to someone else, right? But you make a great point is that communicating with someone first starts with me listening, with me being present enough to listen to what someone's sharing, actively listening what they're sharing, asking questions and being curious about it so that I can then maybe, communicate to them what I agree with, what I don't agree with, what I know, what I don't know. Then there all of a sudden now there's a connection that may be happening, and there's a greater opportunity for development and growth from that experience moving on.
Definitely. And it can be as simple, Kevin. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't require all kinds of checklists and forms and fancy websites or anything like that. It just requires people to be honest, real, and have the patience and give someone else the time, and ask somebody, how you doing today? What's new with you? It depends on the person. How well do you know them? All these questions, who, what, where, when, who am I? Where am I? Who am I with? What's my goal? What's my role? These are the questions that I teach. They're a part of communications transaction analysis. All of that matters. Where are we? Are we online? Are we in person? Is this someone I've known for years or someone I only met recently? Is this a personal acquaintance? Is it a professional? Is it just a friend? Is it a close friend? Is it someone I've had issues with in the past? Is it someone else? All of these things. Is an estranged family member? That's a hot topic. That's more these days. Families are divided due to all kinds of reasons. People see things differently. How do we get on with our own family members when there's disagreements and conflicts? And it starts by asking questions, taking an interest in something, just something as simple as, hey, Kevin, I noticed lately, if I feel like I know you to a point where I can say, hey, I noticed you've seemed a little different lately. Now, I can't say that to someone I don't have that kind of a relationship with. I don't have that background, but someone maybe that I know or work with or interact with on a regular basis. Hey, how are you doing, Kevin? And say the person's name. I've said your name multiple times in this conversation. It's not an accident, and but it's real. I say people's names because it says to you, I'm still with you. I'm still with you, because we're also prone to, getting on these phones of ours, and we check out. It's easy to do. Our primitive brains, our reptilian brains, if you weren't designed to take this much stimulus that we have today. When we were in high school, we're typing papers on a typewriter and white out and that.
Yeah.
And now we've got, it's a totally different thing. Our brains, we've got more stimuli than we've ever had, and it produces cortisol at record levels, and we skip the things I'm talking about, but they're more important than ever now, because that connection post COVID, whatever, is not there, or it's not there like it used to be. And it's only going to get worse unless people like you, me, anyone, puts a stake in the ground and says, I want to stop the bleeding, if you will. And I'm going to take more of an interest, and I'm going to start by talking to you, asking you questions. And then let's let the communication, evolve naturally from there. And hopefully the outcomes will be better. Always no, but more often than not, yes, for practitioners, we found. So,
Well, I just thinking of, we were just talking about Father's Day, and
yeah.
Sierra, my daughter, and her husband stopped by on the way back from uh, uh, going to see his sister and his mom and dad, and in St. Charles, and so they stopped at the house for the, kind of just spend a little bit of time with Diane and I, and she just came off of the first run of her being in the musical Grease, and we were asking questions. Diane and I were asking questions of them about, how, what was, you know because we know a lot of the different members that were at their family gathering in St. Charles, asking them questions about that, asking her questions about what she thought of, from her perspective regarding the show. But it was, at the end of the day, it was about genuinely wanting to connect with her and Kevin about what their experience was like. And
Yeah.
and it ended up being a rich conversation as a result that we benefited, meaning Diana and I benefited from hearing those stories and what was going on, and so it was label it, it was a good hour and a half, whatever the time was. And it was everything that you just talked about. But it was from that standpoint of spending the time to ask about somebody's experience
Yeah.
so that we can then enrich our connection and experience.
Exactly. And yeah, and that's a great example. I have a quick story. I have a neighbor down the road here, and the other day had an interaction with this person. Haven't spoken to him much over the time I've lived here. Got the sense that maybe he was a little bit more to himself, kind of quiet, wasn't really interested in engaging. Well, the other day, kind of flagged me down, and the conversation started poorly. He had some questions for me and some challenges for me. I'll just keep it kind of general, but he was kind of taking a couple of shots at some things that were going on, and I immediately, like most people, I'll get defensive, right? Let's be honest. What do you mean? I felt like I was being attacked a little bit. And so my gut reaction was to, kind of zoom back a little bit. Instead, I'm thinking, trying to, okay, Tom, practice what you preach here, buddy, practice what you preach. So my first thought, instead of just responding, was to start asking him questions. And it's very difficult to do that. But the point is, once I started asking this man some questions about him, and where he's coming from so that I could try to better understand his point of view, because his point of view, what I'm only seeing the out front part, he's sort of, maybe coming at me a little bit. That's the highly visible part. But the bigger question is, well, why? Where's this coming from? There's a reason this man is reacting this way. He's obviously got some fear about something. We're angry because we're fearful, right? And it comes out as aggression sometimes. We all understand this. But I started asking some questions, found out he had some conditions physically. He had to retire early, mentally and otherwise. He's had some ongoing challenges from some things that he was sharing with me. And by the time 5-7 minutes later, I had a much better understanding of where he was coming from, and it wholly changed my response to his initial, way he was coming at me that way. And so by asking him some questions and learning a little bit about him, and interestingly too, his countenance. I mean, he was kind of angry at first, and as soon as I started asking him questions and he started sharing about himself, his countenance changed. His assertiveness, his aggressiveness in his nonverbals in his face sort of opened up, and he relaxed his shoulders. And by the time it was all done, we shook hands, we laughed, and he said, "I'm sorry. I kind of something to the effect of, I didn't really give you the benefit of the doubt on that. I have a better understanding now. Thanks for taking the time. Thanks for talking with me about this, whatever." And it's not yay me. It was yay him for having the courage to do it in the first place. But together now, and I don't know how our relationship is going to be from now on, but it's certainly better than it was. But it had to start with me. I couldn't just say, well, it's that guy's fault, because look, he's coming at me and I don't like that. People do that today. Most of us do that today too quickly, more now than ever. And I'm just saying that every company, large or small, every family, this stuff is going on. And so for those of us as individuals who are all a part of this, which is every human on the earth, the onus is on us to do that. Ask questions, use their name, tell some stories, get to know them, where they're coming from. I promise you, more often than not, when you do that, the outcome that comes back is beneficial mutually for them and for you. And that's what everybody wants, I think.
No, I agree. I agree with you 100%. And yes, there are going to be times, right? Like that situation where there was no prep time. There was no,
Nope.
and so you had to, in that moment, right? In the midst of, getting engaged, from the standpoint of potentially a threat, that you had to, ground yourself. And it's all those things that we do in our quiet time and our exercise time, all those things. So when we have the unexpected happen, then I can respond and not react to a situation how I want to actually be, not versus what the situation
Yeah.
allowed to happen.
If I could just, wrap up with this idea here, and it might sound, again, sometimes this stuff sounds oversimplistic, but it's anything but. When we deep dive into every nuance of every communication, if we watch this video back, there's all kinds of nuances going on just with you and I here today. But there's so many nuances, and here's the rhetorical question for all of us. If you, me, and the rest of the 7 or 8 billion people in the world, however many there are today, if each of us took the onus on ourselves and got honest and said, you know, look, I'm going to be self-aware here and recognize that I can be a better communicator. To what degree is, I don't know. Some of us have more challenges than others, but if I can be if I can improve myself as a communicator, even just 5%, 1%, 10%, whatever it is, imagine the collective improvement across our country, across the world, if everybody committed. I just want to get a little bit better at how I do this, how I respond, how I engage or don't engage, how I reply to that email or don't reply to that email or that DM on social media. Do I attack? Do I not? How do I, if we all got just a little bit better at it, what would the collective ripple effect be? It would be enormous. The world would be transformed. And I know that sounds very lofty and almost too idealistic, but this is what I talk about. Helping the world be a better place, one interaction at a time. You and your wife talking to your daughter and your son-in-law about that. That was an interaction, and it was a good one. The way that it was handled, the way you guys did that with my neighbor, what I just shared. That interaction, it could have been a lot worse. It ended a little bit better. Now, look, not every situation is going to end on a positive, but at least we're making that effort forward. And again, the onus comes back to us. And Kevin, I want the world to be a better place. I want to do my little bit of a part of that. So getting in front of people and talking about these sorts of things as often as possible is what I get up in the morning for, among other things, because I think it's just that important. And I think we're all the target market for this. Every one of us, doesn't matter who you are, how old you are, all of us are, men, women, and young or old. And so that's the challenge for all of us here, is to become more self-aware, become more situationally aware, and then also double down on your own self-management. What's best next? That's the question that's always running in my head. And when I interact with anyone, what's best next here? Not what I feel like doing next. What's best next? And that's subjective, but the more you pay attention to these sorts of things, the better answers come forward more often than not.
Say again, you just said something. I want us to like drive home that your purpose is that you want a better world, one interaction at a time. Did I get that right?
Yeah, if you and I learn how to, if you and I can commit to learning how to communicate more effectively, the how we are, and understand that how we are as communicators is directly connected to our psychology, our temperament, our natural inborn personality styles, traits, our collective experiences, all the things that have shaped us. If we can commit to being better communicators and lean into those nuances and improve even just slightly improve how we do this communication thing that we all know is so important, we can help make the world a better place, one interaction at a time. How many interactions a day do you and I have with people via online or in person? Countless. We all do. At the Ace Hardware store, at the grocery store, at Walmart, at Target, at a school, at your job, wherever you are. We all have countless interactions. And if we can lean into this, one interaction at a time, what's best next here? Who am I in this situation? Who is this person? And go into this asking more questions, using folks' name and trying to understand where they're coming from and being more proactive in our communication, not reactive, one interaction at a time. I believe the change can be massive, but we gotta get buy-in on it. And that's C-suite on down. Okay. And no, I'll just say the bigger the bank account, sometimes, not always, the bigger the bank account, the more need for this kind of training I found, in all fairness. And I've got some colleagues down here that I've said this to. These are some very successful people, and they get in their silos and they're not getting the feedback anymore. They need it more than anyone, doing executive coaching and things like that. So it's from the entry level person to the C-suite, everywhere in between. Let's make the world a better place, one interaction at a time. That's how you change the world. We change the world, starts with ourselves. So we know that quote, but it's so true. It's so true.
Absolutely. Tom, what would be the best way if someone wanted to reach out to you, wanted to learn more about what you're doing, or just connect with you? What's the best way for someone to get a hold of you, reach out, follow what you're doing?
I've got so many, like everybody else, all my social medias and everything. My name is spelled Tomleu, Tom Leu. So at Tomleu on any social media, that's where you can find me. My website is tomleu.com, 6 letters. Leu. It's an odd spelling. I'm aware of it, but tomleu.com is a good place to start. Got some things in transition on my websites and all that, but if you go there, you can get to anywhere. And my talks are on there, and all of my resources, and my podcast, and all my photography and stuff. And I appreciate it, Kevin. I'm so thankful to be able to be back on your show here, talk about these things. I think they're so important. I hope my passion for it and my urgency for it comes through. I'd love to talk about these things. I love to work with people on this stuff because I think it's the ball game, among other things. But it starts with us. Let's take on that personal challenge to be better as communicators, to help make the world a little bit better place, because we need it. We need it now more than ever.
Tom, again, thank you. I always enjoy our time together. Time
Thanks,
always
Kevin.
goes by faster when we spend when we're together talking. And once again, thank you. And for anyone who's listening, if any of the things that Tom talked about resonate with you, and you think someone might benefit from listening to this particular episode or connecting with Tom, please forward this particular this message, pass that on to them, this episode, as well as Tom's information. Again, I agree with Tom 100%. It starts with us, and we can make our world a better place by first making our world a better place. So,
Great. Yeah, absolutely, Kevin. Thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate your time and the opportunity to be here with on your show again, Kevin. Thanks so much, my friend.
all right, guys, everybody, I will see you again next week. And as always, I appreciate you being here. Thank you.